In the heart of a bustling European city, where ancient cobblestone streets meet sleek modern architecture, lies a palace that has stood for centuries. This grand structure is more than just a tourist attraction. It's a symbol of history, tradition, and pride. Every day, thousands of visitors from all over the world flock to see its towering spires, golden gates, and intricate carvings. But what truly captures their attention are the royal guards stationed outside. Silent sentinels dressed in striking uniforms, standing as unwavering protectors of the monarchy. Among these guards is Captain Elias Hartmann, a man whose name might not be known to the public, but whose presence commands respect. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with an expression so stern it could intimidate even the boldest onlooker, Elias has been serving as a royal guard for over a decade. To him, this isn't just a job, it's a calling. He takes immense pride in upholding the dignity of the institution he represents, knowing full well that his role extends beyond security. The guards are living embodiments of the nation's heritage, and every movement they make, every stance they hold, tells a story of discipline and sacrifice. The area around the palace buzzes with energy. Tourists chatter excitedly, snapping photos at every turn. Families pose for pictures in front of the ornate gates, while children marvel at the guards' polished helmets and gleaming rifles. It's a scene filled with awe and wonder, but also one fraught with challenges for those tasked with maintaining order. Signs clearly state rules like "do not touch the guards" and "maintain respectful distance," yet not everyone pays attention. Some tourists try to get closer, hoping to capture the perfect Instagram shot, while others test the limits of the guards' patience by making jokes or attempting silly stunts. Elias, however, is no stranger to such distractions. Over the years, he's encountered everything, from people mimicking his rigid posture to kids trying to sneak behind him for a quick photo. Through it all, he remains unflappable, embodying the motto drilled into every guard: stillness is strength. His focus never wavers, even when surrounded by chaos. Yet today feels different. There's an unusual tension in the air, though Elias can't quite put his finger on why. Perhaps it's the unusually large crowd gathered near the gates, or maybe it's the way some individuals seem more boisterous than usual. Whatever it is, Elias senses that something unexpected might happen. As the morning sun casts long shadows across the courtyard, Elias adjusts his stance slightly, ensuring his posture remains impeccable. His eyes scan the area, taking note of the faces around him. Most are harmless sightseers, eager to soak in the magnificence of the palace. But there's always that one person who stands out, the one who seems determined to disrupt the harmony. Little does Elias know, today will bring someone unlike anyone he's faced before. Someone who will push him to his limits and force him to confront a side of himself he thought he had under control. Among the sea of tourists milling about the palace grounds, one figure stands out. His name is Max Reynolds, a wiry man in his late 20s with a baseball cap tilted backward and a camera slung around his neck. Unlike most visitors who come to admire the palace's grandeur or learn about its history, Max has a different agenda. He's here for laughs, clicks, and likes. A self-proclaimed content creator, Max thrives on attention, especially when it comes at the expense of others. Over the years, he's built a modest online following by filming himself pulling pranks, some harmless, others bordering on reckless. Max isn't your typical tourist. While others take time to read plaques or listen to tour guides, he strides past them, scanning the area for opportunities to stir things up. Today, his sharp eyes lock onto the royal guards, standing like statues near the palace gates. He smirks, already envisioning how this could play out. The very idea of provoking someone so disciplined excites him. To Max, these guards aren't symbols of tradition. They're props in his latest video stunt. And Captain Elias Hartmann, with his imposing stature and unshakable composure, looks like the perfect target. As Max approaches the guarded area, he starts small. At first, he simply waves his hand exaggeratedly in front of Elias's face, pretending not to notice the guard's stoic glare. When Elias doesn't react, Max steps closer, now mimicking the guard's rigid posture. He puffs out his chest, stiffens his arms, and marches in place, earning chuckles from nearby onlookers. Some people roll their eyes at his antics, while others pull out their phones to record the spectacle. Max feeds off their reactions, growing bolder with each passing moment. But waving and mimicking aren't enough to satisfy him. Max craves something bigger, a reaction that will make his audience gasp, laugh, or share his video with friends. So he escalates. He begins shouting absurd phrases like, "Hey, tough guy, can you smile for once?" And "What's the password to get inside the castle?" Each taunt lands without effect, as Elias remains as still as a statue. Frustrated but undeterred, Max decides to cross another line. He reaches out and gently taps Elias's armored shoulder, not once, but twice, then 3 times. By now, the crowd has grown larger, murmuring among themselves about what might happen next. Despite his outward confidence, Max feels a flicker of unease. There's something unsettling about the way Elias hasn't moved an inch, even as the provocations pile up. But Max pushes the thought aside, convincing himself that nothing bad can happen. After all, these guards are supposed to be untouchable, right? They're trained to endure anything without retaliation. With that mindset, Max leans in even closer, his behavior teetering between playful mischief and outright disrespect. What he doesn't realize is that every tap, every shout, and every smirk is chipping away at Elias's patience, bringing them both closer to a breaking point neither could have anticipated. The tension builds, thick enough to cut with a knife. Around them, cameras click and phones record, capturing every second of the unfolding drama. For Max, it's just another day of chasing fame. For Elias, it's a test of everything he stands for, and a decision that will change both their lives forever. The air grows heavy as Max continues his relentless antics, each action pushing the boundaries further. He's now standing mere inches from Captain Elias Hartman, his movements exaggerated and his voice louder than ever. "Come on, big guy. You're not a robot, are you?" Max jeers, poking Elias's shoulder yet again. This time, he doesn't stop at a light tap. He shoves harder, jostling the guard slightly, as if trying to rattle the unshakable fortress of discipline that Elias represents. The crowd around them buzzes with nervous energy. Some people laugh nervously, others exchange uneasy glances, but no one steps in to intervene. Elias's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly, though his body remains rigid. Years of training have conditioned him to endure distractions without flinching, but this feels different. Each taunt lands like a pebble thrown into still water, creating ripples that threaten to disrupt his composure. Inside, a storm brews. His thoughts race. Is this disrespect worth tolerating? Am I failing my duty by allowing this behavior to continue? But outwardly, he shows nothing. To the casual observer, Elias might as well be carved from stone. Max misinterprets the silence as weakness. Emboldened by the lack of response, he leans in even closer, practically shouting into Elias's ear. "Hey, buddy, I'm talking to you. Do you even hear me?" His tone shifts from teasing to mocking, dripping with condescension. Then, just as Elias begins to wonder how much more he can take, Max crosses a line he didn't realize existed. He reaches out and pokes Elias directly in the chest, hard enough to make the guard sway slightly. It's a small motion, barely noticeable, but it's enough to snap something inside Elias. In an instant, Elias moves. What happens next unfolds so quickly that many in the crowd don't fully process it until it's over. One moment, Max is grinning smugly, reveling in his perceived victory. The next, Elias's hand shoots out, gripping Max firmly by the wrist. Before Max can react, Elias uses his other arm to sweep Max's legs out from under him. With practiced precision, Elias flips Max onto the ground, pinning him down briefly before releasing him just as swiftly. The entire sequence lasts less than 5 seconds, but its impact reverberates through the courtyard like a thunderclap. Gasps erupt from the onlookers, followed by a stunned silence. For a beat, no one speaks or moves. Then, chaos breaks loose. Phones flash as dozens of tourists instinctively record the aftermath. Some cheer, impressed by the unexpected display of authority, while others murmur disapprovingly, questioning whether the guard went too far. Max scrambles to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment and disbelief. "What the heck, man?" He sputters, brushing dirt off his clothes. But his words are drowned out by the commotion surrounding him. Elias, meanwhile, returns to his original position, resuming his stoic stance as if nothing has happened. His expression gives nothing away, though his chest rises and falls slightly faster than usual, a subtle sign of the internal turmoil he's suppressing. He knows what he did was unusual, perhaps even controversial, but in that split second, he felt he had no choice. To him, Max's actions weren't just annoying. They were disrespectful to the institution he's sworn to protect. Whether his decision was right or wrong remains to be seen, but one thing is certain. This moment will not be forgotten anytime soon. As the crowd begins to disperse, whispers fill the air. "Did you see that?" Someone asks incredulously. Another replies, "I've never seen anything like it." Within minutes, videos of the incident start circulating online, capturing every detail of the confrontation. The story spreads like wildfire, sparking debates and discussions across social media platforms. Meanwhile, Max stands frozen for a moment, staring at Elias with a mix of shock and indignation. Little does he know, his quest for attention has just taken a turn he never anticipated, one that will thrust both him and the royal guard into the global spotlight. Within minutes of the incident, the palace courtyard transforms from a scene of tension to one of digital chaos. Phones are held high, capturing every angle of the altercation between Max and Captain Elias Hartmann. Tourists huddle together, replaying their videos in disbelief, while others excitedly post clips online with captions like, "Royal Guard loses it on tourist," and "Tourist gets owned by Palace Guard." The internet, always hungry for drama, devours the content instantly. By the time Max dusts himself off and staggers to his feet, the video is already spreading across social media platforms at lightning speed. Within an hour, hashtags like #GuardTakedown and #TouristProvokesGuard begin trending worldwide. Comment sections explode with reactions ranging from admiration to outrage. Some viewers cheer Elias on, calling him a hero for standing up to someone who clearly disrespected the rules. Others criticize him, labeling his actions as excessive and unnecessary. Debates ignite everywhere, from Twitter threads to YouTube comment wars, as people argue over whether the guard's response was justified. Max, sensing an opportunity amid the chaos, quickly regains his composure. He pulls out his own phone and starts recording a live video, playing the role of the aggrieved victim. "Guys, did you see what just happened? This guy literally attacked me for no reason," he says, gesturing dramatically toward Elias, who remains motionless nearby. His tone oscillates between shock and indignation, though a hint of excitement lurks beneath the surface. Max knows this moment could skyrocket his online presence, and he isn't about to let it slip away. As the hours pass, news outlets pick up the story, amplifying its reach even further. Headlines blare across websites and television screens. Viral video shows Royal Guard taking down provocative tourist. Was it self-defense or abuse of power? Talk show hosts discuss the incident during morning segments, inviting legal experts and cultural commentators to weigh in. Meanwhile, memes flood social media, some glorifying Elias as a symbol of authority reclaiming respect, others mocking Max for getting what he deserved. The viral nature of the event ensures that everyone has an opinion, fueling endless debates. Back at the palace, officials scramble to address the growing controversy. Security footage is reviewed, statements are drafted, and internal meetings are held to determine how best to handle the situation. For now, Elias remains stationed outside the gates, maintaining his usual posture despite the whirlwind of attention swirling around him. But behind his stoic exterior lies a mix of emotions: pride in defending his dignity, concern over potential repercussions, and unease at being thrust into the global spotlight. For Max, the aftermath proves equally overwhelming, but in a very different way. As his follower count spikes overnight, he leans into the chaos, posting updates and teasing future content. "You won't believe what happens next," he teases cryptically, keeping his audience hooked. Yet not everyone is impressed. A vocal segment of viewers begins accusing him of staging the entire incident for clout, pointing out his history of similar stunts. Critics call him manipulative, suggesting he deliberately provoked Elias knowing cameras would capture the fallout. While Max shrugs off these accusations, they plant seeds of doubt among some of his supporters. Amid all the noise, one thing becomes clear. This single moment has ignited a firestorm that shows no signs of dying down. Both Elias and Max find themselves caught in a maelstrom of public scrutiny, their actions dissected and debated by millions. For Elias, the question looms large. Was his reaction a necessary defense of honor, or did he cross a line? And for Max, the bigger question emerges: will this viral moment propel him to lasting fame, or will it backfire spectacularly? As the world watches and waits, neither man can fully grasp how deeply this incident will shape their lives moving forward. Behind the towering walls of the palace barracks, Captain Elias Hartmann sits in a dimly lit room, his ceremonial helmet resting on the table before him. The weight of the day's events presses heavily on his shoulders, though he tries to maintain the same composure that has defined his career. Across from him sit two senior officers, their expressions a mix of concern and stern authority. They've called this meeting to discuss the viral incident, a moment that has not only captured global attention, but also placed the Royal Guard under intense scrutiny. The officers begin by reviewing the security footage, playing back the confrontation frame by frame. Elias watches silently as Max's provocations unfold on the screen. The mocking gestures, the repeated pokes, the shouted taunts. Then comes the pivotal moment: Elias's swift takedown of the tourist. While some of his superiors nod approvingly, acknowledging that Max's behavior was unacceptable, others frown, questioning whether Elias's response aligned with protocol. "You know the rules, Captain," one officer says firmly. "Our role is to endure, not retaliate." Elias listens carefully, absorbing every word without interruption. He understands the gravity of the situation. The Royal Guards are symbols of discipline and dignity, and any deviation from that image can have far-reaching consequences. Yet, deep down, he struggles to reconcile his actions with the criticism they sparked. To him, Max's behavior wasn't just an annoyance. It was a direct challenge to the respect owed to the institution he serves. In that split second, Elias felt he had no choice but to act. Now, sitting in this room, he must decide how to defend himself without appearing defiant or unrepentant. After the review, the officers ask for his perspective. Taking a deep breath, Elias speaks thoughtfully, choosing his words with care. "Sir, I take full responsibility for my actions," he begins, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I recognize that responding physically may not have been ideal, but at the time, I believed it was necessary to restore order and uphold the integrity of our position." He pauses, glancing at the helmet on the table. That man tested the limits of what we're expected to endure. If we allow such disrespect to go unchecked, what message does that send about the values we represent? His explanation resonates with some of the officers, who nod in understanding. Others remain skeptical, reminding him that public perception matters as much as personal conviction. "Captain, you must understand that your actions reflect not just on you, but on all of us," one officer says gravely. "We cannot afford to appear heavy-handed or reactive, especially in today's climate." As the meeting concludes, Elias is left with a difficult decision. His commanding officers present him with two options: issue a formal apology to mitigate the backlash, or face disciplinary action that could tarnish his otherwise impeccable record. Though neither choice sits well with him, Elias knows he must prioritize the greater good, the reputation of the royal guard. Reluctantly, he agrees to release a public statement addressing the incident. Later that evening, alone in his quarters, Elias reflects on the day's events. He replays the confrontation in his mind, analyzing every detail. Was there another way to handle it? Could he have endured just a little longer? These questions haunt him, but so does a deeper realization. The world is changing, and traditions like those upheld by the Royal Guard are increasingly clashing with modern expectations. As much as he hates to admit it, perhaps adaptability is as important as discipline. With a heavy heart, Elias drafts his statement. It will be concise yet sincere. An acknowledgement of his mistake, coupled with an explanation of the pressures faced by those in his position. He hopes it will strike a balance between accountability and pride, offering closure to both the public and himself. Little does he know, this act of humility will soon shift the narrative in ways he never anticipated, transforming him from a figure of controversy into one of quiet redemption. The public reaction to Elias's heartfelt statement was swift and profound, sparking a wave of empathy that rippled across social media. In his message, he acknowledged the physical response as a mistake, but also shared the immense pressure guards face daily while maintaining their stoic roles. "I acted out of frustration," he wrote, "but I now see that my actions could have been perceived as excessive. For that, I am truly sorry." His words struck a chord with many who had initially criticized him. Instead of viewing him as an unyielding authoritarian figure, people began to see him as human, a man bound by duty yet pushed to his limits. Supporters of Elias rallied around him, praising his honesty and vulnerability. Hashtags like #RespectTheGuard and #Tradition Under Pressure trended alongside memes depicting Elias as a reluctant hero standing up for dignity in the face of mockery. Fans created fan art showing him as a symbol of honor, juxtaposed against Max's antics. Even some critics softened their stance, admitting that while Elias's reaction wasn't perfect, it was understandable given the circumstances. The tide of public opinion shifted dramatically, with many calling for leniency toward the guard. Meanwhile, Max continued to ride the wave of attention, though cracks began to show in his strategy. His initial videos, where he played the victim, garnered millions of views, but the narrative started to turn against him. Viewers scrutinized his past stunts, labeling him a serial provocateur who thrived on chaos. Clips of his earlier pranks surfaced online, mocking security personnel at landmarks, disrupting solemn ceremonies, and even attempting to climb restricted monuments. Critics argued that Max hadn't been an innocent tourist, but someone actively seeking conflict, making Elias's response seem more justified. Talk shows and news panels invited experts to weigh in, further polarizing opinions. Some defended Max, arguing that no one deserves to be physically confronted regardless of provocation. Others pointed out that his behavior represented a growing issue: tourists disrespecting cultural institutions for clout. A historian appearing on a popular morning show remarked, "These guards aren't props for entertainment. They're part of centuries-old traditions meant to preserve history, not fuel viral moments." Amidst this heated debate, political figures added fuel to the fire. One local politician praised Elias, saying, "Our royal guards deserve respect, not ridicule." Another called for stricter penalties for tourists who disrupt national symbols. Meanwhile, international commentators chimed in, turning the incident into a broader discussion about authority, tradition, and personal responsibility. Some countries used the event to highlight similar challenges faced by their own ceremonial guards, while others questioned whether such roles were still relevant in modern society. For Max, the mounting backlash proved difficult to ignore. As his follower count surged, so did the negativity. Comments under his posts grew increasingly hostile, accusing him of exploiting the situation for fame. When he tried to post another video defending himself, claiming he didn't mean any harm, The response was lukewarm at best. Many viewers saw through his act, criticizing him for refusing to take accountability. Even longtime supporters began unfollowing him, tired of his self-serving narratives. By contrast, Elias emerged as a reluctant icon of resilience and humility. People admired how he owned up to his actions without deflecting blame, showcasing a level of maturity rarely seen in public figures embroiled in controversy. Supporters organized petitions urging authorities to drop any disciplinary measures against him, citing his years of service and recent apology as evidence of his character. Merchandise featuring Elias's likeness, mugs, T-shirts, and posters began selling out online, with proceeds donated to charities supporting veterans and law enforcement members. As days turned into weeks, the divide between Elias and Max became starkly clear. While Elias worked quietly behind the scenes to restore faith in the Royal Guard, Max scrambled to stay relevant, releasing increasingly desperate content that fell flat. The world had moved on from cheering for spectacle. Instead, they celebrated integrity, dignity, and the courage to admit fault. What started as a clash between two individuals had evolved into a global conversation about values. And in that dialogue, Elias Hartman stood tall, while Max Reynolds faded into the background noise of forgotten internet drama. In the weeks following the viral incident, Captain Elias Hartman found himself at a crossroads. The public's support had buoyed his spirits, but he knew that regaining trust wasn't just about issuing an apology. It required action. Determined to turn the controversy into an opportunity for growth, Elias took steps to address the root causes of the conflict and ensure such incidents wouldn't happen again. His superiors, impressed by his humility and willingness to adapt, gave him their full backing. Elias began by initiating conversations with palace officials about modernizing how guards interacted with tourists. He proposed creating clearer guidelines for handling disruptive behavior without resorting to physical intervention. For example, guards could be equipped with discreet earpieces connected to nearby security teams who could step in when situations escalated. Additionally, he suggested installing more visible signage around the palace grounds, reminding visitors of the rules while also explaining the historical significance of the Royal Guard. These measures weren't just practical, they were symbolic gestures aimed at bridging the gap between tradition and modernity. To further rebuild public trust, Elias agreed to participate in a televised interview, an unprecedented move for someone in his position. Dressed in his ceremonial uniform, he sat calmly across from a well-known journalist, answering questions with grace and candor. When asked why he reacted so strongly to Max's provocations, Elias admitted, "I let my emotions get the better of me. That's not something I'm proud of, but it's something I've learned from." He went on to explain the challenges faced by guards, emphasizing the mental toll of enduring constant distractions while maintaining composure. Viewers were moved by his honesty, and many expressed admiration for his commitment to self-improvement. Meanwhile, Max Reynolds struggled to maintain relevance as interest in his antics waned. His attempts to capitalize on the incident grew increasingly desperate. In one video, he claimed he'd been traumatized by the takedown, only to cut to footage of him laughing with friends moments later. Another post featured him staging a mock protest outside the palace gates, holding a sign that read, "Free speech matters." While some loyal followers cheered him on, most saw through the theatrics. Critics mocked him relentlessly, accusing him of being tone-deaf and out of touch. Even brands he partnered with started distancing themselves, fearing association with his fading reputation. As Max's influence dwindled, Elias's redemption arc gained momentum. Supporters launched campaigns celebrating his integrity, dubbing him the guardian of tradition. Local schools invited him to speak about discipline, respect, and accountability, framing him as a role model for younger generations. During these visits, Elias shared stories from his time as a guard, highlighting both the joys and struggles of serving such a historic institution. Children listened wide-eyed as he described standing watch during rainstorms or witnessing heartfelt ceremonies honoring fallen heroes. Through these interactions, Elias reinforced the idea that traditions aren't relics of the past, they're living legacies worth preserving. The palace itself embraced the positive shift, using the incident as a teachable moment. Officials announced plans to host educational workshops for tourists, focusing on cultural sensitivity and the importance of respecting national symbols. Posters featuring Elias alongside messages like, "Respect our heritage," appeared near the palace entrances, serving as gentle reminders rather than stern warnings. Visitors responded positively, often approaching Elias to thank him for his service or ask about his experiences. Though he remained professional, there was a newfound warmth in his demeanor, a testament to the healing power of understanding and forgiveness. By the end of the month, the narrative surrounding Elias Hartman had transformed entirely. From being labeled as overreactive, he emerged as a figure of resilience and reflection, a man who owned his mistakes and worked tirelessly to make amends. On the other hand, Max's quest for fame culminated in diminishing returns. His videos garnered fewer views, his comment sections filled with ridicule, and his once booming online presence faded into obscurity. The contrast between the two men couldn't have been starker. One chose accountability and earned admiration, while the other clung to excuses and lost credibility. Though the world eventually moved on to the next viral sensation, the lessons from this episode lingered. It served as a reminder that actions speak louder than words, and that true strength lies not in dominance, but in humility. For Elias, the journey wasn't easy, but it reaffirmed his belief in the values he'd sworn to uphold. And for those who followed the months after the viral incident, life around the palace had returned to its usual rhythm. Those subtle changes lingered in the air. The golden gates still gleamed under the sunlight, and tourists continued to flock to the historic site, eager to capture memories of their visit. But now, there was a deeper sense of respect among visitors, a quiet acknowledgement of the weight carried by those who stood guard. Captain Elias Hartman remained stationed at his post, as stoic as ever, yet with an aura of wisdom that came from weathering a storm and emerging stronger. Elias's formal reprimand had been mild in comparison to what it could have been, thanks largely to the overwhelming public support he received. His superiors recognized his sincere efforts to learn from the incident and praised him for turning a moment of controversy into an opportunity for growth. Instead of tarnishing his career, the event solidified his reputation as a leader within the royal guard. New recruits looked up to him not just for his discipline, but also for his humility and adaptability. He became a living example of how tradition and modernity could coexist harmoniously. The changes Elias helped implement, clearer signage, better communication systems, and educational workshops for tourists, proved effective. Incidents of disrespect toward the guards dropped significantly, and interactions between visitors and security personnel grew more positive. Families began teaching their children about the importance of respecting cultural symbols, inspired by the stories shared during Elias's school visits. Even seasoned travelers approached the palace with a renewed appreciation for its history and the people tasked with safeguarding it. For Max Reynolds, however, the aftermath told a different story. Once riding high on the wave of viral fame, he found himself struggling to stay relevant. His attempts to reignite interest in his antics fell flat, met with indifference or outright disdain. Brands stopped returning his calls, sponsors dropped collaborations, and his follower count plateaued before beginning a steady decline. What little attention he did receive often came in the form of mockery, with memes portraying him as the tourist who pushed too far. Eventually, he disappeared from the public eye altogether, retreating into obscurity as quickly as he had risen to fleeting prominence. The legacy of the incident lived on, though, serving as a cautionary tale for both sides of the equation. For authorities and institutions, it highlighted the challenges of balancing tradition with the realities of modern tourism. For individuals, it underscored the consequences of seeking attention without considering the impact of one's actions. Social media pundits and cultural critics frequently referenced the event in discussions about accountability, respect, and the blurred lines between humor and harm. As for Elias, the experience left an indelible mark on him personally. While he never sought fame or recognition, he came to understand the power of leading by example. His decision to apologize publicly and take responsibility resonated far beyond the palace walls, inspiring countless others to reflect on their own behaviors. Strangers would occasionally approach him during his patrols, thanking him for setting a standard of integrity in a world often driven by impulsiveness and self-interest. One crisp autumn morning, as Elias stood watch near the palace gates, he noticed a young boy tugging at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, look, that's the guard from the video," the child exclaimed, pointing excitedly. The mother smiled warmly and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart," she replied. "He's the one who taught us all about patience and doing the right thing, even when it's hard." Elias overheard the exchange, but didn't react outwardly. Inside, however, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. In that moment, he realized the true measure of his impact wasn't in the headlines or hashtags. It was in the values passed down to future generations. And so, the story of the Royal Guard and the provocative tourist faded into memory, preserved in replays of that fateful video and recounted in conversations about respect and resilience. It served as a reminder that every action has consequences, and every choice shapes the narrative we leave behind. For Elias Hartman, the incident became less about the moment itself and more about the lessons learned, a testament to the enduring power of dignity, accountability, and grace under pressure.